To London now, where consumer confidence looks like it's in retreat. House prices have fallen again, and that's before the austerity measures really begin. No wonder the Bank of England is cautious in its forecast for the year ahead. Well, for more, we're joined live now by David Buick from BGC Partners. David, welcome to Lateline Business.
Good evening, Chicky.
What news from the Bank of England this morning in its inflation report?
Well, he hasn't quite finished talking, Dr. Mervyn King, the Governor of the Bank of England, and I'm afraid he really has clattered the markets this morning. At the time he rose, the FTSE was down about 1% and is now down about 2.4%. The pound against the dollar has lost about 1.7%, which is significant. And more interesting than anything else, the gilt market, our government bond market, the yields have fallen by about 14 ticks to down to 3.15% for 10 years. So it's certainly left its mark. He was unequivocal in saying that we are on a very rocky road for the next 2 years. Recovery will be extremely soft and very brittle indeed. The Bank of England, whose reputation for forecasting is a little bit marred at the moment, dropped its forecast for 2011 down from 3.5% for GDP down to 2.5%, and frankly we think that's pretty ambitious as well. The facility that the bank has for liquidity, which has a 3-year period, has got 18 months to run, and quantitative easing certainly won't be withdrawn. It's 225 billion facility so far, and there's every possibility, if things get tough in the next few months, when the austerity program really kicks in starting in October, I don't think they'll hesitate in putting some more there as well.
I was going to say, you even before the Governor spoke, you were saying that Britain was showing signs of anxiety. So this must be an extra hit.
It is, because I think probably it's the way that he spelt it out that it was going to be very, very difficult. And despite the fact that inflation has remained above 3% at 3.2%, he was pretty relaxed in saying it would be at 2% by the end of 2012, as the economy had sufficient slack, as I think the terminology he used, to be able to cope with the recent price rises of commodities such as wheat and flour and oil, of course, which is now come back from $82 a barrel, and all the other things that have caused us problems such as gold and, iron ore and other metal prices. These have had a serious effect on our inflation. But he was completely relaxed, makes us feel that the economy really is for a very tough grind, really concerned about unemployment. We had quite good figures this morning showing that 49,000 jobs had been created, taking us down to 2.46 million. But everybody knows that when the public sector feels the spleen venting, for want of a better expression, from the government, there was likely to create a huge number of jobs being lost in the public sector, and we don't see unemployment coming down below 2.2 million in the next 2 years, now, David, at very best.
Now, David, over in the US, the Federal Reserve has also had a very sober outlook, talking about a slowing recovery. One Fed watcher described it, their measures, as recycling money back into treasuries as QE light. What is your view on that?
I think it's a symbolic move because racially the amount of money involved, and I'm not being trite in saying it's only $150 billion, which when you consider the balance sheet of the Fed is at 2.2 trillion. It isn't actually that much, but at least that facility is there. But I think it's much better than saying we are really concerned and therefore we are going to increase specifically quantitative easing in certain areas. And I think Ben Bernanke chose his words very, very carefully. But he certainly left us in very little doubt that the US economy is going to creep back. And we, of course, have the added thing is that very little, if anything, was said about what the US government intends to do with its gargantuan budget deficit and borrowing requirements, and huge amounts of money being required for California and Illinois. This is not good news, and there's no doubt about it. Bond vigilantes will be rattling the cage of President Obama and Tim Geithner next year, I fear.
Can you see real quantitative easing happening again in the US before the end of the year?
No. I think that there is growth there. It is coming down, as we know. It came down from 3.5% to 2.4% for the second quarter. And many people feel that the fourth quarter may not yield any growth at all. It could be flat. But I think before we start actually saying it's all over, I think we need to tread extremely cautiously, not helped at all by the news from China not being as strong as perhaps it has been in previous months. We've still seen enormous export and import increases, but they are much lower than expectation. And I have this funny feeling, and I could be wrong, but I think sufficient internal demand in China will actually stop us going into double-dip recession. But I think it's going to be nip and tuck.
David Buick, thank you very much for talking to Lateline Business today.
You're very welcome.